Have you ever been a caretaker to someone who is very, very sick that you loved so much and would do anything to help them heal? Today, we are going to talk about this very situation in the scriptures and a woman and family who sought for a miracle and received an even greater miracle. So stay tuned.
Welcome to Bible Women in Bathrobes, the podcast where faith meets comfort. Join us Tuesday and Thursday mornings as the gals from Women Warriors of Light and their guests don bathrobes and dive into the inspiring stories of women in the Bible and the teachings of Jesus Christ. From Esther's bravery to the Sermon on the Mount, we explore it all with warmth, laughter, sisterhood, and maybe even a few sleepy-eyed moments. Tune in live or at your leisure as we learn lessons from Scripture which empower women today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bible Women in Bathrobes. I am your host, Tamara K. Anderson, and joining me today is my co-founder of Women Warriors of Light, Wendi Christensen. Wendi, we're excited to have you this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here.
All right, guys, today we are diving into the story of Jairus's wife and daughter. We often talk so much about Jairus and his faith, but he had a wife, and we don't talk about her as often. And so we're going to kind of look at this story from her perspective and the faith required from both mom and dad to keep hoping beyond hope for a miracle with their sweet daughter who was very, very sick. And we are going to be in Mark chapter 5 today, and we're going to cover verses 22 through 24 and 35 through 43. So there's a gap in between here, and we'll talk about that gap in the story as well. All right, so we'll start here in verse 22, and this is what it says. And behold, there cometh one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet. So Jairus fell at Jesus's feet. And so here we know that Jairus and his family, they were somewhat important in society. He was a ruler of a synagogue. By this point in time, there was also a lot of, there were some people who did not believe in Jesus, and some of the rulers of the synagogue were very trying to turn the people away from him because he was kind of disturbing their rituals and stuff like that. This is not how things are done. And yet the people were thronging him because he showed great power and kindness and perform miracles that they just weren't seeing anywhere else. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting. So Jairus and his wife probably had been tending to their daughter for who knows how long. She'd been getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And they'd probably tried, like last week we talked about the woman with the issue of blood, tried to find solutions for her, and they were kind of at their last straw. And it's an interesting position to be in a position where, you know, people are looking to you as a ruler of a synagogue to be an example of devotion to God and to their old ways, and yet you've tried all those things. And there is this new person in town who is healing people, and would you try? Would you seek him out? You know, and yes, in a moment of desperation, they would. Any thoughts at this point of the story, Wendi?
Yeah, just there must have been, there was a lot of controversy around Jesus at this point, and a lot of skepticism, especially I think with those of the synagogue, and the Pharisees and Sadducees had lots of questions, and it must have been hard for Jairus and his wife to even approach Christ, because I'm guessing that that they had spoken together, they had talked together. Jairus had seen and witnessed some things and must have gone home and talked to his wife about, I've noticed, or I've seen this, I've heard this. And that desperation from them both, like you were talking about, just we want so desperately to have this healing. And for them to have seen or heard the rumblings of something so controversial, I kind of look at and compare it to, it would be like new procedures happening today, and somebody that can do things, you would be a little skeptical. You would wonder, can I trust this person? Can I trust what's happening or what's going on with the norm and versus the norm, and what's comfortable and what I know to be safe? And would it be okay for me to look for those answers outside of my safety or my comfort zone? Because that's really what they were doing. They were looking outside for answers from their normal, typical comfort zone that they were used to. It
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
be hard and scary.
It would be. But I'm pausing to think here of this from God's perspective. Do you know what I mean? And how they had begged and begged and pleaded for healing for their daughter and seeing her grow worse. And there had to be a point of decision where both of them just said, go.
Desperation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, inspiration, go. Go and find him. At this point, we have nothing else to lose. She's dying. She's literally dying. And I can only imagine, I would feel the same way if one of my children was dying.
Yes.
Try anything, everything to save them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that act of faith for him to leave at such a time, because I can imagine being left behind and being his wife and just staying there by the bed of my child. And I'm sure he would have wanted to be there when she passed. But in this last act of desperation, him leaving his wife and his daughter, that must have been heart-wrenching. But yet, I'm going to go. I'm going to try one last thing. And her being willing to let him go, knowing he might not be there when she dies, but go and try, because we have nothing else to lose, So it really must have come down to that choice for both of them to say, okay, I know we're supposed to be examples of religion in the community, and we're going to go try this new guy. Which, oh my goodness, the Jewish people were so steeped in their traditions at this point, So, it's almost like they were drawing a line in the sand and taking a step towards the other side and saying, we're going to try Jesus.
Right.
We're going to try Jesus.
But you see that he realizes, well, you'll get into 23, right?
You want to read it really quick? Yeah, he saw him, he fell at his feet. So he's totally being humble here. Like, please.
Yep. Desperation, being very, very humble. And he looks for Christ, and he finds him, and he besought him greatly, saying, my little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands on her, that she may be healed, and she shall live. That's bold, right?
Yeah.
That's so bold. I mean, he must have been at this point where his faith had to be so strong that he could boldly go to this man, to Christ, which we don't know if he's ever, I would assume he's never met him before. He's probably just heard the stories or seen or witnessed some things at this point in time. Maybe because he's been, the ruler of the synagogue, he's heard people talking and the rumblings. And that was enough for him and his wife to go, look, search him out. That was enough to be able to say, to ask him to actually, hey, come, lay your hands on her, heal her. Mm-hmm. He had to have that much faith to just boldly say, do it. Because I think I would have approached it as, hey, if you're okay, if you've got some time, I would really appreciate it. No, it was bold, so bold. Come, heal her.
And I know you can. It was that complete faith. I know you can.
And she shall live. Yes. he doesn't have any doubts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that reflects the faith of his wife as well.
Yes.
Honestly,
Yes.
you know, this great healer, he can heal her. Go find him, you know. Um, and she shall live. And the Savior stops what he's doing, whatever he was doing, and says, you know, okay, let's go. And it says in verse 24, and Jesus went with him, and much people followed him and thronged him. So he must have been in the midst of teaching or something like that
Yes.
when this happened, you know.
Mhm.
And so Jairus knew I'm interrupting him. But, and then it's interesting, and we talked about last week, we talked about the woman with the issue of blood. So in this multitude and in him traveling with Jairus to go visit his wife and daughter at this point, that's when we have the story that we talked about last week of the woman with the issue of blood.
Yes.
And I think, Wendy, you had an interesting comment on this. And so I'll let you say it before we continue the story.
Well, yeah, he's so busy, and he's being thronged with all these people around him, and he's busy, he's focused, he's following. Obviously, he knows it's important to go and perform this miracle, Christ does. But on the way, he actually has another miracle that he does and that he performs, and that he wasn't too busy in the midst of all of this craziness and so much happening around him and so much going on with this throng of people just following him, to stop along the way and perform another miracle, to see somebody else, to see this woman with her issue of blood and to perform a miracle. And how do we sometimes I think we get so busy and so focused on things that we don't stop along the way to witness or see or do things that could be done, to stop and see the miracles along the way,
Mm.
and those that are in need and that could be healed. That I think sometimes we get so focused on, I gotta go do this, I gotta finish this, I gotta go help this person, to actually realize that there are opportunities all along our way where we can stop and perform or do things or see people that need to be seen along our
Mm.
journey of helping. So I think it's a beautiful example that Christ sets for us, that he wasn't too busy to stop and notice somebody along the way to this other massive, huge miracle that he was getting ready to perform. He performs a huge other miracle on the way.
Yeah. Ah, it's it is such a great reminder to of us for us to slow down
Yes.
and to notice the people, like you said, along our way,
Mm-hmm.
and to help and heal and be his hands.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great example we can learn from the Savior. Okay, so we pick this story up in verse 35 of Mark now. So he had literally just healed the woman with the issue of blood, said, daughter, you know, thy faith hath made thee whole, go in peace. And then in verse 35, it says, while he yet spake, so he's literally saying these words, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? And oh my goodness, how
Yeah. His
this
feelings.
must have just stabbed Jairus and his wife. Think of her in that situation. She sent her husband out to find him. It's taking a long time because there is such a big crowd. They're having a hard time getting through. Um, and while you're in the waiting, the worst thing happens.
Yeah.
You know, your daughter takes her last breath, and
Mm-hmm.
how she must have just wept. And then beyond hope, we tried. You know, we had such faith. And of course, the servant goes to tell him, don't bother him. She's already dead. And listen to what Jesus said in verse 36. And as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he saith unto the ruler of the synagogue, be not afraid, only believe. Wow. You know, because I'm sure at that point his fear had probably overtaken,
Yeah.
and he just said, keep hoping,
Mm-hmm.
keep hoping. And I'm sure in some ways he was like, really?
Yeah. Well, and I think I would have been a little bit angry at that point in time. Like, why did you stop to perform this other miracle and you didn't hurry through the crowd? Because because Jesus took some time for this other woman, right? I would have been like, hello, my daughter just died while you're performing this other miracle. you
Yeah.
know, but he does it, Christ. It's almost like Jesus knows his heart, he did know his heart. And he says, be not afraid, only believe. Because I'm sure he was trying to comfort him, and with him questioning, wait a minute, it took time away from my daughter for you to stop and perform this other miracle, and now she's gone. I'm
Mhm.
sure that must have been going through his heart,
Yeah.
Jairus's heart, to just and then to be spoken to, be at peace, just believe,
Yeah.
keep believing, just
Yeah.
keep believing. And how many times do we go through those moments where it's like, it's too late, nothing can happen, nothing can change at this point. But yet, if we sit in it for a minute and we listen to the Spirit whisper to us, just believe, don't be afraid, just believe.
Mhm. That can be such an answer, don't you think? In any situation, and even if we have lost one to
Yes.
death, someone to death, what a comfort that can be. Be not afraid, only believe. And of course, that requires us hoping for that reunion in the next life, which is hard when you're grieving, but sometimes that's the only thing we can cling to. That's where our faith is tested, when we're up against a wall and suddenly, when someone you love passes, you start to think, do I really believe I'll see them again?
Mhm.
That's when that faith is tested and you decide, am I going to tip towards faith, or am I going to tip towards bitterness? And I think there's days that you kind of vacillate between the two,
Mhm.
and that's part of grief. Grief is that, experiencing all of the emotions, and anger is sometimes one of them. So, but that is the answer, whatever stage of grief you're in, be not afraid, only believe, you know.
And whatever circumstance that you're in, whatever the trial is that you're in, just trying to hold on to that belief and that faith that the healing will come, that it will get better, even if you feel like you're trudging through mud sometimes, right? To get there and to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these next couple of verses teach us an important lesson as well. Um, and I'm going to read them. He said, and he suffered no man to follow him, save Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And he cometh to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and seeth the tumult, and them that wept and wailed greatly. So this would often happen, that they would have people who would come and weep and wail with the family, um, often paid. This was their job. I'm a good crier. I'll come. Actually, I weep when people cry. You can send me to almost anybody's funeral. You'll find me crying in the back, but probably not as loud as these people were. And here's an interesting. And when he was come in, he saith unto them, why make ye this ado and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and the mother of the damsel, and them that were with him, and entereth in where the damsel was lying. And I love this example because Jesus, the people who get to witness this miracle, are people who follow that advice. Be not afraid, only believe. The people who are going to laugh and scorn, put them out. And I think this is a great example for Jairus, for his wife. Surround yourself with people who will love and support you and have faith. You know, um, this miracle, raising the dead, required people of faith to be there and to be present.
Mhm.
I don't know. I think there's a powerful lesson there. Any thoughts on that?
And he had just come from a throng of people which had to have been hundreds, or, I don't know how many, but a throng, I think, is a big number, but tons and tons of people who did get to just witness a miracle. They all got to see, at least those that were directly around him. There were enough around them that his disciples are like, all these people are around you when you're worried about somebody who touched you. And they got to witness that miracle. But this was a special situation. This not every There wasn't a crowd of people that he wanted to have witnessed this one. And that those, you're right, that didn't believe, they were told to leave. Like, you're not going to believe, you're not going to contribute to this beautiful, holy, sacred ground that we're going to stand on to see this miracle happen. And that it took those who did have faith and did want to believe. And it's not that Christ didn't love those people that he threw out. He just knew they wouldn't appreciate it. And it wouldn't probably change them. And he wanted to make it a space where it was for those who were going to receive and understand the beautiful miracle that was about to happen. Right?
Yeah.
That it was a sacred space, and he wanted to respect it as a sacred space and really hold space for this group of people to see and witness what they were going to see and witness. It really almost became a tender, sacred space that this next miracle was going to be performed at.
Yeah. I'm going to pause right here also and turn our perspective to Jairus's wife. So here she's just lost her daughter. I'm sure she's probably just weeping, just weeping with grief. Her husband wasn't there when it happened. And so probably feeling completely alone, completely abandoned by God. And yet her husband shows up, and I can just imagine her running to him and just sobbing on his shoulder, just falling into his arms.
She died. You missed. Yeah.
Yeah. You missed. She's gone. She's gone. You weren't here, and carrying that load by herself must have been very, very heavy. And yet him at the same moment smiling at her with love and saying, I found him. He told me to not give up hope yet, he said to believe. And I'm sure that must have caused like a myriad of emotions in her. Like, wait, what?
And having faith in her husband too.
Yes.
You say this man can do this. She had to have so much faith in her husband.
Yeah.
And to trust him. Can I trust you that this man is going to be able to do something? And feeling like it was too late. It was too late. She must have been so disappointed. So heartbroken and disappointed.
Yeah. Oh. So I'm sure at this moment she had a choice to make too. Before I had hope, she's gone. Stuff like this just didn't happen. It doesn't happen now very often either, although there are people who have near-death experiences. So it just doesn't happen super often. And so she probably had to have that moment where she teetered on the edge. Do I tip towards faith? And of course, as a mother, you would say, of course, I'm going to try and believe, exercise faith, even though I don't know this man. I've heard enough that, okay, I'll try. And
he's already walking in her home with power. Like he's already doing things against tradition. Walks into the home and he throws out these weepers and wailers, and she had to be a little in shock. What is he doing?
What's he doing? Why is he kicking our traditional people out? And so perhaps that requires another layer of trust in God, that he isn't going to do things traditionally all the time. Sometimes the miracles are going to come in a way you do not expect it, and believing that that miracle can happen even when we least expect it. And then let's continue in verse 41. So they must have been in this intimate setting: father, mother, Peter, James, and John, and Jesus. That's it. 6 people. Well, and their beautiful daughter who had just passed her body. And in verse 41, it says, "And he took the damsel by the hand and said unto her, Talitha cumi," and I'm probably not saying that right, which is being interpreted, "Damsel, I say unto thee, arise." And straightway the damsel rose and walked, for she was of the age of 12 years. And they were astonished with great astonishment. Wow. I love the astonished part because even though you're trying to believe, when you actually see it happen, I'm sure there was part of them that were just like, suck that breath in, like pinch me, I'm dreaming type situation. Like this isn't really happening.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow. Wow.
Yeah.
Any thoughts there?
My thoughts went to Peter, James, and John. I mean, what they must have been thinking to go, he just healed this woman that touched his robe, and now he's raising this daughter from the dead. And it's all happened probably within, 20 minutes of each other. I would just be overwhelmed. I would be, again, yeah, that wow factor of, I can't believe what I'm seeing, what I'm witnessing. And then for these sweet parents that must have been, I've been there when you were talking about death. 3 years ago, I was there when my mom took her last breath. When you're there, and I used to work for hospice, so I would be there. I've been at many deaths. I've attended many deaths before. To see somebody and witness somebody take their last breath, it's a very sacred moment. If you've ever been in a room when someone has passed, it is a very tender, very sacred moment, and to where you can feel, at least for me, there's an energy that changes. You can feel them going where they need to go. And so I'm sure this must have been a very sacred, tender space that they're walking into with this mom being there and feeling that, almost that sacredness of the place that they're walking into with somebody just passing. And life just is all of a sudden on pause, because it really does. When somebody passes and dies, it's like life just pauses, and it just all stops for a minute. Your world just stops. And that's where she was. That's where the mom was. And the dad walking in on that was there too. Jairus and his sweet, sweet wife just were all on pause. And then to see her get up with Jesus saying, "Daughter," and he calls her by name, or at least I guess being interpreted damsel, it feels to me like he's calling her by name. He knows her and tells her to arise, to get up. That everything, all the air in that room must have just instantly changed.
Mm-hmm.
Her getting up, they were speechless, I'm sure. And that's what it says. They were astonished. Then I think it's because they're witnessing such a sacred, holy thing that they must have just sat there in awe at what they were seeing, what they were witnessing. Because I can only imagine the feeling in that room just completely changing from one of she's gone to wherever whether you believe it's heaven she goes to, or wherever she's there, to all of a sudden being back in her body and present again.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. It's so amazing. And here's an interesting commandment Jesus gives them at the end. He says, "And he charged them straitly that no man should know it, and commanded that something should be given her to eat." We'll tack that on at the end. Don't tell anybody about this. And by the way, give her something to eat,
And she needs to eat. Yeah. Which she
needs-
probably hadn't been. She had not been nourished, and he's immediately nourish her. Let's, help her body. He knew what she needed, and he knows what we need, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting that he asked them not to tell anyone. How can you? You don't even have to say anything, or people are going to know something happened in there. Do you know what I mean? We were just weeping and wailing, and all of a sudden, you see her on the street the next day, like, what the heck? Do you know what I mean? So of course it's in all of the gospels. Nobody knows, but well, Peter, James, and John knew. So of course everybody knows about it. But wow. I mean, and I understand why Jesus probably didn't want something so sacred shared. And so that's probably what he meant, don't you think?
I think he was like, people aren't ready for this miracle yet. That again, I think it was probably such a beautiful, sacred moment, sacred experience. And if you've ever had those sacred moments, you do just kind of hold them close to your heart
Mhm.
and just hold on to them and just I think you kind of have to wrap your brain around it too, right? You ponder it, you think about it, you play it over and over in your mind. I'm sure they did. They had
Yeah.
to play it over and over in their mind. And the world wasn't quite ready for it yet because they're
Mhm.
just starting to see and understand who Jesus is.
Yeah.
And only those that were ready for it got to see it and witness it until the right time
Yeah.
when there were others who were ready to witness a miracle so great.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I wish we had the end of their story too. You know what
Yes.
I mean? Like, tell me what happened to Jairus and his wife and the daughter. Oh, wouldn't you love her testimony? Oh,
Oh, yeah. And her
um,
experience and to hear her story, was she floating above her body like those near death experiences and going, okay, he's telling me to come back?
yeah.
Who knows what her experience
Oh, I
she
can
re-
imagine that this was such a boon to their faith. Um, and I can only imagine that this miracle pushed Jairus as a synagogue leader to side on the side of Jesus. How could you not?
Mhm, mhm.
How could you not? And whether that made him an outcast at that point, I don't know. We don't know the end of his story. But the fact that his wife was there and this impacted his family so greatly, I'm sure even if he and his wife and his family had to go through hard things after this because of that, you can't help but think
It had to have affected the
it
rest.
was worth it was worth it. You know what I mean? My
Absolutely.
daughter's alive. It was worth it. So it's
Because of,
almost like you had to shun what the world thinks and focus on faith. Really and truly, this is what matters most in the end is that faith in God and that God can work miracles,
yeah.
you know?
We have to do that today, don't you think? Sometimes where the world thinks and says different things, even about Christ, I've heard sometimes some things that just hurt my heart where people don't believe in him anymore.
Mhm.
And it's not that I'm judging them, it's more of a place of I've seen I have faith and I want you to have faith because I'm sure Jairus and his wife and his daughter had this incredible faith for the rest of their lives because of this miracle and what they had seen and what they had witnessed. And that sometimes, yeah, the world doesn't get it. So we have to hold it in our heart and hold
Mhm.
on to that beautiful faith that we have in Jesus Christ and
Yeah.
just keep believing.
Yeah. The phrase that keeps popping into my head is that phrase from Mary and witness when the shepherds came and all that stuff to bow at Jesus's feet at his birth. And it says that Mary kept all those things in her heart. And I think this is the same kind of sacred moment there, that to treasure the sacred moments you have with God,
Mhm.
whether it comes at the time of death, where you feel that special spirit around when someone passes, or I know I've had sacred moments just in prayer sometimes where I'm receiving ideas or answers, and the air feels so thick around me with love and peace. And I end up recording those things in my journal. And you're right, I don't share it with everybody. I'll share it with those who are close to me, my husband, perhaps one of my kids if I feel impressed, but usually it's just something between me and a very, very few. Um, and so I think just like these stories are recorded in the scriptures and build our faith, that it's important that we record those sacred moments um, to remind us of the power of God and miracles. Because another thing that I've noticed that happens is after sacred moments, the adversary always comes,
Yes.
and tries to make us disbelieve on whatever inspiration we had or whatever sacred moment we have to try to diminish faith. But if we record it like these stories have been recorded, then we can refer back to it and remember the power of the moment. Because we forget, we're mortal, we forget things. At least I do. I don't forget the feelings often, but sometimes I forget the little details.
I was gonna say it's the details. Yeah.
Yeah.
What a beautiful experience. What a beautiful moment and a special thing for them, for everyone who witnessed that. And that they must have seen and known enough to remember to write that he commanded something should be given her to eat. I love that detail that's thrown in there, right? It was enough that it was probably the recording of that they put that in there, those details just to remind them of the feeling and the experience that they were having. Such a beautiful, beautiful experience that we get to read about and have, and then look at our own lives. What are those special, tender moments that we get to have with Jesus?
Yeah. Oh, final takeaways before we wrap it up, Wendi.
I just love with this story the fact that it just shows so much care and compassion that Christ has for each and every one of us and our hearts and where we're at, and that he just knows, as you see him know this sweet family, that he knows us. He knows what's going on in our individual lives and the heartaches that we're feeling. And I love that he threw these people out that didn't, that were just doing their thing and just going through the motions. But he also, I think, did it with love and compassion, but just asking them, what are you doing? Why are you here? And even though they're scoffing and scorning and laughing at him, he doesn't, he just dismisses it. Such a beautiful example of, people are not going to get and understand those special sacred things in our lives, but that Jesus gets us. He gets us, he knows us, he understands us, and he sees our faith. I just think it's a beautiful example of that in this story. And he's willing to step into those sacred places with us. I love that from the story.
That's a powerful takeaway. I love the faith of this little family and how they chose Jesus. They chose Jesus. That was a conscious choice. We choose Jesus at this pivotal moment. And I think that's a great example for all of us.
And saw him.
Yeah, seek him out in your pivotal moments, in your daily moments. Seek Jesus. And that phrase in the middle, be not afraid, only believe. When you encounter situations that make you afraid, keep your faith alive. And know that Jesus can work miracles. It may not be raising the dead, but he can work miracles in your soul. He can help with healing if you do have someone pass. So sometimes those are the other kind of miracles he works. So be not afraid, only believe. Seek him in faith and be not afraid, only believe. Oh, my friends, thanks for joining us this morning on our discussion of Jairus and his wife and their beautiful daughter and the miracle that Jesus performed. It is such an incredible story, and I'm thankful we've been able to dive into it this morning. And I hope you can find and pray for faith today to be not afraid and believe in Christ and to seek him and bring him with you on your journeys and in your pains and in your desperation, and believe that he can help you too.
Thanks for tuning in to Bible, Women, and Bathrobes, hosted by Women Warriors of Light. We've loved exploring the stories of remarkable women or the teachings of the Savior today with you. If today's episode brought someone special to mind, be sure to spread the word. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a moment of inspiration and sisterhood. Just a friendly reminder, all opinions we share are entirely personal, as we are trying to decipher and apply Bible teachings just like you are. Until next time, stay faithful, and may your journey be blessed and illuminated by God's love.